New Left Media's Chase Whiteside was recently on the ground in Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, Washington, and Ohio. In Ohio, he spoke to some Mitt Romney supporters. Let's take a quick look at that clip.
He's trying to convince people that he didn't go to that church for 20 years. He was a member of that congregation
for
20
years. He's acknowledged he went there.
Not 20 years.
I've heard some different excerpts from him, how much he loves the Muslim religion.
I think he's got a soft spot for the Muslims.
He's a Muslim. He has a Muslim father. That's his background. And he reads the Quran.
You talked about him going to Reverend Wright's church for 20 years.
Yes.
But now you also think he's a Muslim.
Well, he is a Muslim. His father was a Muslim, his father was an atheist, and his father was a communist.
Was his father a Muslim, or was his father an atheist?
He's all three.
What's Romney's plan?
I think he just believes in all classes and how, he likes it to be not just one class is superior to the other classes, and just how he likes just to keep it all in the same, it's just a big change. It's a bigger step up than what it'd be with Obama, as the past 4 years way better.
Yeah, now you talked about him, he's for all classes.
Right.
You might have heard of the videotape where Romney was overheard saying, 47% of the public don't take personal care or responsibility for their lives. That doesn't sound like he's for all classes, does it?
You see, and that's just what people say.
In this case, it's what Mitt Romney said.
Right. It could be just for, just to get the upper, maybe he's going for the upper class or the middle class or whatever, just whoever he wants them to get more votes. He might just be saying to get more votes, but then again, whatever the population for the upper class is, if it's bigger than that, maybe he did that He's got strategy going on, and he's obviously doing better than Obama if he's got smart strategy like that.
Joining me now is Chase Whiteside, documentary filmmaker with New Left Media. Chase, let's start briefly with the Ohio Romney video because it's gone super viral. You take this attitude when you go and talk to these people, which I like, which is where you don't really argue with them. In other words, you present what are facts that contradict what they're saying, but you do it in a way that's so nice that they almost just kind of agree with you that they have no idea what they're talking about, but don't even seem to realize it. Is this like a deliberate strategy on your part?
Well, I think that's what most journalists should do, is to try to ask questions without condescending and to let people speak. That way you're actually able to find out what it is people think. And so that's what we try to do, is not so much challenge people as ask them what it is they believe about the issues. And then when they say something that's, factually inaccurate, we tend not to be combative. We just sort of say, well, this doesn't make sense and here's why, and then just let them respond. And that way I think we get a much more honest portrayal of what they actually believe.
Are you kind of numb to some of the responses that you get and the disconnect between reality and rhetoric that you see? Like, do you just get used to it, or are you always, when you go back and are editing these things, say, wow, I can't believe this exists?
Well, I think we should all be used to it. We shouldn't be surprised that it exists. If you do polling of the conservative movement, the very things that you hear said, repeated in our videos, are what self-identified conservatives are saying they believe. I think if you tuned into Fox News or read the Drudge Report for a day, you'd be hearing a lot of the same things. But that said, I grew up in a pretty conservative area with a fairly conservative family who have views that aren't always too far outside of the views you hear in the videos. So I'm here in Ohio is a mixed state. I'm very used to hearing most of the things we hear. None of it's really that surprising, I don't think. I think in the most recent video you had a guy who warned that our religious freedoms were being taken by Buddhists, and that was maybe the one thing that actually got me.
That's a new one, yeah. That's definitely not a common one in the narrative.
Fox.
So then let's talk about the four gay marriage states, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, and Washington, where you were also on the ground. I found it interesting, with Maine and Maryland passing marriage equality via popular vote, and we're just seeing, it's very clear which direction the tide is turning. And every time, and this week, in fact, we're going to have an anti-gay former Navy chaplain on to get his updated thoughts on, isn't it just a matter of time before you lose this battle? Do you feel the same way? Do you feel that it's kind of a tide that can't be stopped at this point?
Well, I think we saw a few things. First of all, you're looking at Maine and Maryland going and voting to allow gays to legally marry, along with Washington, the first three states that have ever done that. They're not at all, Maine and Maryland are not like the kind of liberal enclaves we think of, say, California as being. And California, of course, with Prop 8 voted against legalizing same-sex marriage. So certainly things are changing. A married lobsterman was never really going to be the image we had for legalized same-sex marriage. But I'm not sure that I think it's simply a matter of time that all states are going to be able to do this. Still, we have to consider that about half the country is opposed to same-sex marriage. And a lot of the states where there are still gay people in the South are not close at all to passing by popular vote legalized same-sex marriage. So I think this is really something that there's going to have to be a federal solution to eventually. We can't have this patchwork of different laws in different states and depending on where you live or move, because it's unfair. If you have to move for work or you have to, or any number of reasons, you shouldn't suddenly have less rights than you did in another state because of who you love.
Sure. I mean, you're going in the direction when people insist on saying everything should just ultimately be left up to the states and really creating two countries. And you're really even seeing that in that now we've had citizens in 15 different states, we talked about earlier, file petitions to secede from the United States. Now, putting aside the fact that financially it would be completely untenable because the blue states so overwhelmingly support the red states in this country, it's very clear that if you leave things to the states, coming up after today, we're going to talk about sex with animals is not specifically illegal in more than 20 U.S. states. Medical marijuana.
Of course, you guys are going to talk about sex with animals in the South. No, well, listen. I think that when civil rights issues, it's not the kind of thing that put to a popular vote makes a lot of sense because you're ultimately talking about a minority group, and that puts the minority group in the awkward position of having to convince, a majority of voters that they deserve equal rights. Now, it's amazing that we've had success in these 4 states, and it's worth noting that Minnesota, they didn't make same-sex marriage legal. They just voted down a constitutional amendment to ban it. And that was a close vote. So there's still, even Minnesota is still many years off from legalizing same-sex marriage by popular vote. But so I think it's a very difficult challenge, and one that I think I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to rule or when they're going to rule on it. If it will be a narrow ruling that says, well, states should decide, or if it's going to be one that says that it's unconstitutional to discriminate and withhold marriage rights. But I will say that it's somewhat good news that it looks like the Supreme Court could potentially turn quite liberal for the first time in a long time in this next term.
That's absolutely right. Today, actually, in my national newspaper column, I wrote about, for all the things about President Obama and Mitt Romney where there are not significant differences, the direction that the Supreme Court could take based on who President Obama replaces could be a huge, huge difference. So a lot of things kind of coming together here. A lot of good news, certainly, out of a lot of these states. We've been speaking with Chase Whiteside. He's a documentary filmmaker with New Left Media. Check out all of the latest videos, including in Ohio, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, and Washington. Chase, great always to talk to you. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll take a break. We'll be back with plenty more after this.